How's going guys, welcome to the channel. In this video we are gonna see, what if Naruto was the 7 heavenly virtues of lions? Part 1. Huge shout out to Itachi for this story. If you wants to see awesome fanfiction like this, don't forget to subscribe. Now let's get into the video. Prologue Avalon. In Konoha, day of the funeral, Hokage's office. Herodias stared at the group in front of her. The newly instated Gondaime Hokage watched in interest as Kasumi and Menma were brought before her. Kasumi bearing the eyes of her clan and Menma bearing the eyes of the Sage of Six Paths. This was rather problematic, there was no doubt the council will try to raise hell over having them put in a breeding program. Thinking about their parents, Herodias put Kushina aside as she considered that the Uzumaki woman's current state of mind wasn't good. Between the death of her child and still overlooking the positive and negative aspects of divorce. Kushina was likely not going to get a say in this, while Minato could either subject his children to making his clan great again or trying to avoid repeating his mistakes. Have you notified the elders? Herodias asked. They want to have a meeting later today. Merlin answered, making her nod. Herodias stared intently at her teacher's descendants. How are you two feeling? Do your eyes hurt, ache or even itch for that matter? She asked. My eyes feel like fire. Menma said as he rubbed them. I feel sick. Kasumi said as she rubbed her own single active eye. Careful, your eyes are extra sensitive compared to normal human vision. It's like blinding a Hyuga with a bright light. Herodias said, wondering whatever happened to those bright flash type jutsus. Oh yeah, I heard a lot of Hyuga got killed because of some light release technique. Ban said, hearing those stories from Mito. Putting that aside, what do you believe is the best course of action? Merlin asked. Herodias sighed, a lot of bullshit Sarutobi-sama was put through. The only problem is I don't age and I'm going to be on this planet for longer than my predecessor. She answered. Council can be a real bitch. Ban said. You said a bad word. Menma said with a pointed finger. What are you going to do about it, brat? Ban asked as Kasumi kept her little brother silent. Herodias sighed, for now, I suggest that you two find a pair of sunglasses. I don't want to remind you that we survived 2 or 3 invasions with the first 2 being from our enemy and ally. There is also no doubt that forces within our village will try take such power for themselves. She said. What happened to Root anyways? Ban asked. Gone for good, and I will not bend to the will of a couple old crones who were once small children when I started my career. Herodias answered. Do they know about your status? Ban asked with a raised brow. Herodias nodded, it took some explaining, but I managed to keep the power balance in my favor. Regardless of where I came from, the civilians assumed that male humans are suited for the head. She said, remembering how many merchants risked going into bankruptcy on that day. I guess that's all we can do now. So I suggest you two come up with an excuse for your parents and sister when you return home. Merlin told the 2 children. Alright, come on Menma-kun. I guess we have to explain our eye powers. Kasumi said as she lifted her younger brother in her arms. Okay, bye Mr. Ban. Bye Ms. Merlin. Menma said as he waved goodbye. When the 2 left, Herodias decided to play a risky act. How are you two by the way? With the Ban raised his hand. It's a lot, I don't want to get into right now if you don't mind. Ban said, trying to keep calm. I understand, I apologize for prying. Herodias replied, feeling some regret. Although, even with the return of Lady Elizabeth and Sir Meliodas, I'm not sure how I should feel as I wasn't too close to Naruto. She said. Ban nodded, we should head back. I know how Lane is about being good hosts. He said as he walked out of the office. Merlin was about to walk away only to stop and turn to Herodias. Herodias, did you ever have any family outside of your teacher? She asked. None, my parents died from causes that I can't remember. Lady Korra was everything to me, and I dedicated my life to locating her missing child. However, I knew with their lifespan, the child would likely be older than an elderly Uzumaki to this day. However, I wasn't very fond of lying about my death and having to change identity all the time. It takes a steel will to handle being alone. Herodias explained. I see. Merlin said. Herodias decided to add a little bit more, however, the real harm is self-isolation. She added. Which made Merlin stop for a moment before continuing to make her way back to the mansion. Herodias returned to her normal duties, wondering what the future had in store for them. However, while some say that you should focus on the present to prepare for the future. The past may not define you, but it will be where you originated. Having said that, Herodias heard a knock on her door. Enter. She said. The door opened, revealing a fair-skinned woman with raven hair and onyx-colored eyes and a brown-haired girl wearing a forehead protector. Naturally, this would be the part where you would automatically expect Herodias to be wary of the girl, as if she didn't recognize her. However, this is the biggest shinobi village with probably the largest roster, therefore, not even the Hokage could remember every face and name. May I help you? Herodias asked. The woman looked around in confusion. Is the Sandeami not here anymore? She asked. Herodias narrowed her eyes. Heroes in Saratobi officially resigned once again as of last week. I think you would be aware of this. Especially with the recent invasion. She answered, making the eyes of the pair go wide-eyed. Were you not aware of this? She asked. The woman shook her head. Ma'am, you won't believe this, but my name is Makoto Uchiha and this is Izumi Uchiha. I don't know how, but we awakened in the cemetery only an hour ago. She confessed. Herodias quickly signaled her Anbu and restrained them. I want Yamanaka to search their minds. They could be spies or sleeper agents. She said. Hi. The Anbu squad said. Ma'am, this all a mistake. We're telling you the truth. Izumi said as she struggled. Your logic is absurd. The only Uchiha left are Sasuke and Itachi, with the latter having become a missing nin. Take them away. Herodias ordered as the two Uchiha women were taken away as they continued attempting to plead their case. Elsewhere. A red-haired woman awakened in a large field of grass. As she opened her eyes, she found herself alone with no sign of any other human near her. As she extended her senses, she sensed a dark power full of negative energy. She recognized the energy signature, and it only made her go pale. QB, the woman said before running off to find the energy source. She couldn't risk such a volatile power to run free. It was her duty as an Uzumaki and member of the village to keep it restrained. Mansion, afternoon. Thank you, goodbye. Elaine said as she waved goodbye to the guests. Ban sighed as he made several shadow clones and started cleaning. That's the end of that. He said. Hey Ban, do you want any help? King asked, hoping to be civil. Sure, grab a broom if you want. Ban replied. Meliodas was standing against the wall thinking about things. The past week was playing over his head over 100 times. First he and his wife wake up from the dead, they learn their grandson is dead, and now they're alive while he's gone like the rest of his descendants. However, that left Kasumi, Naruto's sister. But it's a mystery as to how Kasumi was able to awaken to her power. The captain of the 7 deadly sins could only sigh as he wondered what was next. Meanwhile, Elizabeth could only stare at the photos that Naruto had stored in a book. Meliodas was well aware of how excited Naruto was when he learned about his missing family members. All the adventures the kid would enjoy having as he would seek everyone out. Hey Elizabeth, anything interesting in there? Meliodas asked. A few cute photos from when Naruto found your sacred treasure. Elizabeth said while wiping a tear away. Meliodas watched as Naruto gave a fox grin as his little arms held Lost Vein. The next photo moved onto Naruto's first birthday cake. It was sloppy, but Ban looked like he made some effort into making it despite having no baking experience. Another one showed Naruto going over his studies as several dead plants surrounded him. Naruto was studying the art of combining elements. I never figured out why, but he was able to use stuff like the Mokuton and Hyutin. I don't think my chakra was able to cause that, so it's still a mystery as to how it passed on to everyone else. Ban explained. How was he as a child, Ban? Elizabeth asked. He was tough enough to face a smaller version of my fox form. But he was still a kid nonetheless. Ban answered as he started tying up a trash bag. You know, I remember having to break into the hospital. Civilians tried to hoard some medicine during something they considered a recession and claimed that they couldn't fund the hospital. A lot of those greedy bastards were keeping that crap for themselves. He explained. Elizabeth shuddered at the thought of what Ban must have went through to keep Naruto healthy. Although, it's not as if another determined parent would have done something similar. Thanks for keeping an eye on him, Ban, even if it was temporary. Meliodas said as he was grateful for his friend's help. Ban sighed as he placed a hand on his friend's shoulder. Anytime, Captain. I guess, well, I don't know what to think. He said as he left Meliodas' side. I'm worried about him. Elizabeth said. I am too, but I'm sure we can work things out. Meliodas replied as Elaine hugged the real Ban from behind. At night. As everyone prepared for another night of slumber. Merlin had placed her hand on the doorknob to her room. Once more remembering the day Naruto had carried her in his arms. The day they practically moved in together, the day she learned of his scars and the day he created the home he always wanted. As she was ready to enter and sleep alone, she felt another presence. May I help you, Calcifer? Merlin asked as she faced the manifestation of the mansion. Miss Merlin, if you would like, I could create another room. There is still lots of space and… That's alright, Calcifer. Princess Veronica already offered me space in her room so I wouldn't be alone, but I already declined the offer. I don't mind sleeping alone, really. Merlin said. Calcifer nodded, as you wish, ma'am. He said before sinking into the floor. Merlin sighed as she went inside to rest for the night. Like everyone else, she just rested and prepared for whatever the next day had in store for them. But Gother. The sin of lust was looking out his window in deep thought. While many would consider Gother to be emotionless and rather rude because of said behavior that could surpass an Aburami. Well, Aburami clan members aren't necessarily rude unless you count being introverted in general. The pink-haired doll pulled out his glass heart and thought about the reason why he kept it out of his body. Flashback, mansion construction. Naruto was working hard in the center of the foundation. It was late and it was safe to say that Naruto was likely close to falling unconscious. Almost where did I put that? Naruto asked as he started closing his eyes rapidly. Then he slapped himself, focus lions. If Grandpa can handle seeing his lover die a lot of times, then I can handle building a house. I hope they're proud of me, he said before chuckling and falling from losing his balance. That's when he felt a blanket placed on him. You will catch a cold if you sleep out here, said a voice. Naruto managed to barely open his eyes. Haku? Or some other random androgynous guy who looks like a lady? He asked. No, it is Gother. Were you expecting someone else? Gother asked as Naruto turned his head to the sin of lust. Never mind, what are you doing here? Naruto asked. Elaine and Diane have gotten worried about you. So I took the liberty and went to retrieve you myself. Gother answered. Naruto yawned. Aw man, I was just about to give life to the foundation, he said, piquing Gother's interest. You are bringing life to inanimate object. Tell me more, Gother said as he squatted down to look at Naruto. Naruto started to close his eyes as his breathing started to sound a bit faint. He actually did put in some effort to stay awake to answer his self-imposed brother. Gother stared at Naruto's sleepy face and wondered about the idea that children look adorable when they are asleep. However, Gother still had his own extreme philosophy that he followed. So he grabbed Naruto by the shoulders and shook him rapidly. Wake up, Gother yelled. Ah. Don't do that, Naruto yelled as he started panting. Tell me about the sentient, Gother requested. Naruto took a deep breath. Alright, I got inspired by that movie I took Mom and Aunt Diane to. In it, there was a house that was powered by a sentient flame named Calcifer, and it was kept alive using a heart that belonged to the protagonist, he explained. So you want to give it life then? However, seeing as you only have basic demon and goddess magic, I can only assume that you have limited knowledge in bringing things to life, Gother said as he didn't believe that jutsus had the ability to grant life. That sums it up, big brother. We shinobi made a jutsu to control the dead. I was able to revive the dead, but I can't create life. Although thinking about it, maybe I'm overstepping my boundaries, Naruto explained as he started to fall back asleep. Gother put his hands on Naruto and sat him up. Well, I have the tool to help you, he said as Naruto was very close to passing out. As the sentient doll attempted to maintain his brother's consciousness, I'll give you my heart, he said as Naruto shook his head awake. Hey. I'm flattered, but this is not a thing brothers are supposed to do. Also, I'm kind of in a relationship with Merlin, Naruto said as he had many mixed ideas by what Gother was suggesting. Do not worry, little brother. I already had a lover once and I do not intend to repeat the same mistake, Gother replied. Naruto raised a brow in confusion. I thought you tried dating Gila, he said. And at one point, I thought you tried dating Jericho, Gother said. Both remained silent as they stared at each other with blank faces. This is going to be a weird memory to come back to, Naruto said as Gother tilted his head in confusion. What confuses me is how a 3,000-year-old woman found interest in you. Especially since I can tell that her emotions are genuine for you, Gother said. Okay, are you trying to offend me or teach me how to finish my house? Naruto asked as Gother removed his chest and revealed a glass chest. This is my heart, Gother said. Then how are you still alive? Never mind, Naruto said as he pinched the bridge of his nose. Gother smiled as he presented his glass heart. You see, little brother, I was created by former member of the 10 Commandments who was forced into working for them through threats. He was a powerful mage and was imprisoned by Zeldris, so he was able to see through my eyes, he explained. Naruto blinked twice. I'm either really tired and hearing a lot of insanity, or you just decided to withhold information like that, he said accusingly. Gother learned a lot from his surrogate brother. He just grinned as best he could when answering. Take it as you will, he said as the grin scared Naruto. Okay, I'm done now. And Diane, if you can hear me, please pick me up. I promise to come home early. No more late nights. I promise, Naruto yelled as he tried crawling away. Silly little brother, it is rude to escape while I am telling my story, Gother said as he dragged Naruto back. Anyways, my creator invented this heart so I would experience emotions. However, there was a slight issue, he continued. Yeah, you and your creepy smiles followed by you needing to manipulate girls into being your lover, Naruto replied as Gother shook his head. No, you see, after the Holy War ended, I entered hibernation and found myself in a cave. My creator had died and I buried him under a few rocks, Gother began to explain as he sat down after Naruto settled down. That day, I realized I was in Lions. I was soon visited by the only princess of the time, Naja Lions. He continued. Okay, time out. Did Grandpa know about this? What about Merlinheim? Right before she met that Arthur guy, she was pretty close to the royal family. Naruto asked as these were questionable things. Gother nodded, yes, however it was not their place to say anything nor did it matter. He answered. Naruto sulked as Gother continued, anyways, I met Naja and her brother, the future King Bartra. Naja had a frail heart and it was weakening by the day, however Bartra never told me of this until it was too late. He explained. Naruto started giving a sentimental look to Gother. He only knew about Bartra's deceased brother Denzel, who died after he let his body be possessed by a goddess clan member that was sealed away in a sword but was killed during the assault on lions. So he wasn't aware of Naja, and it sounds as if she died prematurely. For every day we spent together, I soon fell in love, as Naja motivated me to do so many things that she had yearned to do herself. Such as riding a horse and various other things she's read in fairy tales. However, reality is cold and uncaring. Gother explained as his voice started to lower. Naruto asked sadness and sorrow. I'm sorry. Naruto said as he lowered his head. Gother shook his head, you wouldn't have known. He said. How did it happen? Naruto asked. Naja was born with a weak heart and wasn't meant to be doing anything too exciting for her health. Oftentimes Bartra would recommend her to stay in bed. However, Naja was adventurous and wanted to live a life of adventure, such as what was written in her fantasy books. Gother said as a genuine smile slowly appeared on his face. Naruto smiled as he recognized the emotion present on the doll's face. But as I said, not all fairy tales have good endings. I attempted to replace her heart with my own, but I failed. The knights broke in and mistook my deeds for murder, and I was tried and punished to be burned at the stake, but survived. I threw this heart away until King Bartra presented it to Merlin to convince me to hang on to it. Gother explained as he handed it over. Naruto smiled as he received it, you're really giving it to me? Won't it hurt to part away with it? He asked. Silly little brother, it's not an actual organ, so therefore my health will not be affected. Just as it is pointless for you to keep feeding me pancakes. Gother said. Then why do you keep eating them? Also, where do you store them? Naruto asked as he wasn't aware of Gother's biology as he isn't sentient. Gother gave another smile when he answered, that's a special secret. He said. Well, if you're okay with it, I'll give it a try. Naruto said as he took the heart and scanned it. Gother smiled, I hope you like it. It's likely more valuable in your hands than in my own. He said. Oh shit. Naruto said. Little brother, swearing is not good for you. Gother said. Lenura then, we have a problem. I don't think you're going to like this. Naruto spoke up. Gother turned to his nervous-looking brother, please do not tell me that you've broken it immediately after I have just given it to you. Dottie said. Naruto looked up with an offended look on his face, hey, I may be reckless and have issues, but I'm not dumb enough to break someone else's property. He replied angrily. Gother folded his arms, well then, what is the issue? He asked. Naruto scratched his head nervously, well there's no magic. He said. Gother blinked twice, you broke it. He said accusingly. No, I didn't. I know Dad barely taught me any magic, since the only thing I know is Grandpa's sword, breaking seals and even a few of his fox hunt tricks. Except there's nothing in this thing. It's just fancy glass. Naruto said as Gother's eyes widened. No, that cannot be true. Perhaps you did something wrong. Gother said as he took his heart back. Gother, I hate to break it to you, but unless that thing's broken. It's just a placebo effect. Naruto said as Gother was in denial as he frantically tried to see what was wrong. No, there's a reasonable explanation. Perhaps Merlin can take a look at it. Gother said as he was trying to leave only for Naruto to hold him back. Gother. This means your emotions are real. You've just been holding them back. Naruto told him. Gother just stood there in silence, no then my pain it was real, and I could never rid myself of it. He said as he started to channel his magic into his palm. Naruto acted quickly and held the doll's hands back, Gother stop it. What the heck are you doing? He asked. I have to erase my memories again. I can't bear the thoughts again. Gother answered as he started to shake. What? Why? Naruto asked. Naruto, I can't handle it. Goodbye. Gother said as he tried to use his magic on himself, only to be stopped by a chakra chain that restrained him. Why are you stopping me? He asked. Gother, I'm not letting you tamper with your memories. Naruto said as he tried to avoid applying too much pressure on him. Why not? It's just information, some things aren't worth exploring. Take your technique where your eyes turn into stars for example. Gother argued. Gother, memories are what build you. They're what they define. What creates your morality and basically tells you right from wrong. Naruto said. Gother still failed to see reason, then just make more. You can avoid all the bad experiences and move on. He said. Then what's the point of living? Why do you want to live in a world where you pretend nothing happens? Naruto yelled. Prisoners of the sky asked Elithibist. I do not understand your question. Gother said as he suddenly felt something stopping him. Gother, tell me, why do you live? Naruto asked as he called back his chains and his bangs covered his eyes. Gother just stood there in silence for several minutes, self-preservation. He asked. Are you asking or telling me? Naruto asked as Gother looked at him in confusion. Gother, without memories. What purpose? What goal do you have if you don't understand what you want? He asked. Memories are merely information stored in our minds. Gother replied. Then you're just erasing everything you've learned. After that you're just wandering around until you find the next thing that interests you. Only then you're repeating the cycle. Naruto explained. That actually stumped Gother. He had no purpose and was just extending his existence into an unknown period of time. It was a conundrum that the puppet had found himself in. Normally this would be those rare moments where Gother would just stand there in silence. Oblivious to the sentient world surrounding him. At least until he realized that his body felt restrained, pressure was on his chest, and it was felt as if there were liquids leaking onto it. Gother had come to realize that Naruto was hugging him and crying at the same time. Gother, you can call memories information all you want. Naruto said with a sniffle. But no matter what, Ban is my dad. Elaine is my mom. Jericho is the sister figure I like to tease. Merlin is the woman I love and everyone else. You included. He said before looking at the pink-haired Sin with teary eyes. You're all my family and I never want to lose that. I don't want to live in an idle life where I have nothing. He said ever so passionately. And just for once Gother wanted to agree. Gother's response was to return the hug as he also started to cry. End of song. End of flashback. Little brother. Gother muttered before feeling a foreign vibration on his chest. What is this? Did I suddenly develop a true heart? No, this is on the right side of my chest. He said as he lowered the collar of his shirt and noticed something odd about the mark of the ram on his chest. Gother went to a mirror and decided to take a better look. After a matter of minutes, Gother realized that there's something off about his tattoo. Did Meliodas or Merlin tamper with it upon having him recruited? Perhaps it was something worth asking in the next morning depending on their mood in the next morning. And again, it was likely that it could be that Gother is overthinking it and just didn't bother paying attention to detail. Perhaps ending the day was the best choice of option. But Arthur couldn't help but to feel depressed. It was all planned. He and Vivian knew this would happen. They were told. They should have done something. They could have done something. Arthur could have finished Zeldris there and ignored the plan. Though it wouldn't do any good. There was too many anomalies and potential issues that could arise. At best, everything would have been reset to before Arthur delivered the final blow. I bet Vivian is going through the same thing. I just hope everything clears up soon. Arthur said to himself before tucking himself into bed. Please, let this curse end. He said before entering his slumber. However, there was something else in his mind that wouldn't let him sleep. Behind Avalon. The next morning. Meliodas took a good look at the ram sign on Gother's body. I think I figured it out. He said. What is it? Gother asked. The only way to truly find out this mystery is to ask Merlin herself. This kind of stuff is out my league. Meliodas answered as Gother nodded. Captain, didn't you place Naruto's mark on his shoulder with your ghost magic or something? Actually, now that I think about it, how did you even give Naruto a note to give to us? There's so many questions that are confusing as to how you were able to affect him. King asked. In a phrase, the power of family. Meliodas said, though it was not really a truth or an answer. Actually, it's something we passed down to Tristan who would have it passed down to his children and descendants. Elizabeth interjected. See? Power of family. Meliodas interrupted. Diane shushed him and gestured for Elizabeth to continue. Originally it was meant to be a way for a part of our souls to help Tristan or anyone else in their time of need. As well as passing down our magic should an issue arise where they need it. Elizabeth explained. That still doesn't explain the note. King said. Well, actually, it's kind of hard to explain. You see, when we spoke with Naruto, Elizabeth soon found herself interrupted yet again. This time it was by Kasumi who came running in with Menma in her arms. I'm sorry. I know I shouldn't be barging in here, but I had nowhere else to go. She said in a panicked voice. Slow down there, what's wrong? Meliodas asked. Mama and Papa were fighting and they got really loud. Menma said in a scared voice. Elizabeth picked up Menma in her arms and started to calm him down. There, can you explain why? She asked. Menma sniffled as he tried to speak. They were yelling about my eyes. Papa said something about the family being great and Mama kept yelling at him and got angry because of something about Aniki. He answered. There was no doubt Minato was still trying to save face or tampering with that ridiculous prophecy from a long time ago. It was hard to tell, but no doubt Menma is too shaken up and they didn't want to press this onto Kasumi, who was most likely scared by what she saw. Even if she was a highly trained shinobi. Parents often put their pride in patriotism before remembering that people like her are still children. Elizabeth gently stroked his head. "Poor child, I always hoped things would be different after the war," she said. Meliodas nodded. The average genin wasn't much younger than a holy knight. Gila is one of the younger knights he faced in battle, and she almost got killed by having to turn into a monster from the demon blood. A 16-year-old shouldn't be throwing away her life like that. It was too difficult to decide who should take the blame for this. It's most likely just human nature. "Ms. Elizabeth, why did my family leave Aniki behind?" Menma asked. Elizabeth looked saddened as she didn't have a real answer to that. Flashback, dreamscape. Elizabeth and Meliodas looked down at a younger Naruto. "Why did my family not want me?" he asked. For once Meliodas wasn't too blunt. "Well kid, some people aren't very smart. They say they want something, but they just dump it after they get it. People do selfish things to get what they want," he said as Elizabeth liked his wording. "Naruto, it's not a matter of not being wanted. It's just that sometimes people make poor choices by having the right idea. You can't say your actions are right if other people get hurt," Elizabeth added as Naruto wiped his eyes. "Well, I don't want a family who won't hurt me because they think they love. I want a family who thinks about me first," Naruto said, hoping not to sound selfish. Elizabeth kneeled down and hugged the young boy. "There's nothing wrong with that, Naruto. While some duties come first in some cases. Family should never be ignored or abandoned," she said. "Yup, just like I needed to abandon the tavern when the war came. Though, if you don't mind doing me a solid by cleaning up the boar hat," Meliodas said. "Meliodas?" Elizabeth exclaimed as now was not a good time to mention his old business. Naruto nodded. "I will, grandpa. I'll do it for you," he said. The older blonde man ruffled his hair. "Speaking of which, Naruto. What would you say if I told you there was some family that would be happy to meet you?" Elizabeth asked as she caught her descendant's interest. End of flashback. "Kid, sometimes people make poor choices and claim to be the good guy," Meliodas told Menma. Menma didn't entirely stand, but knew his parents did questionable things. Even now, as he had the eyes of the Kami no Shinobi. The child had no wisdom to guide him and needed to see both the ugly and beauty of the world in order to understand it. But Vivian. The former arrogant apprentice of Merlin, Vivian, sat in her room while looking out a window. She was having the same thoughts and feelings as Arthur. Vivian was a bit saddened by recent events but was well aware that things were beyond her control at this point. All she could do was accept that stuff happened and has to hope for the better. Ugh, but why did his era have to be so weird? It's just less clean version of Lions. Even worse, there's a lot more wars now. Vivian complained before covering her mouth and bracing herself. As nothing happened, she took a deep breath and felt relieved. "I swear he was just going to hit me over the head again," she said with a giggle. However, her mind was clouded by a strange message that embeds itself into her thoughts. "Hind Avalon." "What? Ava Avalon?" Vivian asked. "Is that name familiar? Was it the name of a song? Maybe a poem? A title of a big figure? Maybe it was a book or mentioned in a book by chance." It was something she decided to look into. Vivian proceeded to go through her journal and see if she could find anything related to the term. No good. Maybe I should check the library. Maybe they have something related. Sensei did build this place after all, and it's better than the house he showed us, Vivian said as she quickly ran out the door only to run into her original teacher. "Is there an emergency I need to be aware about, Vivian?" Merlin asked. "Oh, hello, teacher," Vivian said a bit nervously. Merlin smiled at the title. "I still find it a bit surprising at how humble you've become," she said. "Yeah, you try getting hit about 100 times on the head. Though seeing as he is my teacher, he wouldn't dare hurt you," Vivian thought. "I think I like you this way," Merlin said as she placed a hand on Vivian's head as a light blush appeared on her cheeks. "Well, sometimes patience is hard, so I have to learn the hard way," Vivian said as she gently removed Merlin's hand from her head. "Oh, by the way, do you know what Avalon means?" she asked. Merlin raised an eyebrow in confusion. "Where did you hear that?" she asked. Vivian gave her a sheepish smile. "It came up in my head and now it's bugging me. I thought that maybe it was a lyric in a song or poem. So now I can't get rid of the curiosity," she answered. Merlin placed a hand up to her chin and thought about it. "I remember now, that was the island where Excalibur was forged. Thinking about it now, where is the sword? Something that powerful shouldn't have been lost. If so, we should look for it," she said in a serious manner. "Oh, that thing. I'm sure Arthur left it somewhere safe," Vivian said. "But Arthur?" Arthur panicked as he clutched his head as he felt as if someone had hit him on the head. Then he realized nothing had happened, whether he's dead, alive or just not in the same vicinity. I can still feel a well-placed punch in the head," he said. Back with Vivian. Merlin's face turned into a frown. "He better, Excalibur isn't any ordinary sword," she said. "One more question, Ms. Merlin. Where exactly was Avalon?" Vivian said, having to correct herself. It's not like she patiently waited for the world's geographical change to occur. Merlin thought about it. "That I honestly can't remember," she answered. Vivian nodded. "Well, I guess that satisfied my curiosity," she said with a giggle. "Find Avalon." Vivian grunted as she put her hand on her forehead. "Is something wrong?" Merlin asked. "Yeah, just lightheaded is all," Vivian said as she went back to her room. Only leaving Merlin's infinite curiosity to invade her thoughts. What on earth would make Vivian so concerned about Avalon? I know Excalibur was forged on that island, but what else is there for her there? She wondered as she went to her lab. A week later, Naruto's grave. Kushina stared at the headstone. All sorts of emotions and voices invaded her mind. Denied her the right to think for herself. All thoughts bombarding her and making her feel sick of herself. Emotions ranging from depression, hate, fear. The voices in her mind begging for forgiveness, telling Kushina that she is filth, speaking as if her worst nightmares are going to become reality. "I'm so sorry, Naru-chan," Kushina said as her eyes started to water and she covered her mouth. "That's not going to work. You can't undo death with simple apologies. If you feel remorse, then you should be down there instead of your child, you witch. It's inevitable. Your delusions are not reality. Your mistakes define you and you shall suffer for them." Kushina gripped her head in pain as the tears fell down her cheeks. All the while she begged for the voices to stop. Only for them to argue back that she had no right to request such a luxury. Kushina's suffering only ended when a hand touched her shoulder. "Are you okay, ma'am?" asked a female voice. Kushina wiped her eyes and turned to find Elaine in her human form. "Who are you?" she stuttered. "My name is Elaine. Are you grieving for my stepson?" Elaine asked as Kushina's heart kept panging in regret. "Yes, I suppose I can't argue that he's my child. I lost that right, haven't I?" Kushina asked as Elaine looked surprised for a moment. "Are you Kushina-san?" Elaine asked as the woman nodded. "I see, Ban doesn't have many good things to say about you, and Naruto didn't want to talk about any of you. Please don't take that as personal offense on my part," she said. Kushina nodded. "No, it's fine, my parents always told me that family comes first regardless of the situation. It's a creed I broke because I believed more in an outsider's ideals. And look what happened," she said as she started to weep again. Elaine stepped closer to Kushina and hugged her. "I know it's painful. I'd only known Naruto for a couple months, and yet I felt so close to him. My husband raised him as if he were his own child. I could never forgive myself if I was the cause of his death. So I can understand your pain. It doesn't mean you're a bad person," she explained. Kushina hugged back, not because someone listened to her rant or because she was given sympathy. But because someone else is there to keep Naruto from suffering. Ban watched from afar. He didn't want anything to do with his previous Jinchuriki. Though that didn't stop Elaine from giving her some sympathy. Minato and Kushina were garbage in his opinion, but he couldn't force everyone to have the same opinion. "Whatever," Ban said before walking back inside. With Gother. Merlin continued to study Gother's mark, but while she could see that it was clearly different from the standard marks everyone else had. It was strange, the ink wasn't any different and it didn't look like someone tampered with it. Sure, not everyone received their marks at the same time, and Naruto's mark didn't appear until after the Chunin exam's invasion. Though Merlin and everyone else wasn't really in the state of mind to visit the deceased boy's body just to study his mark. "I still can't see anything worth noting, Gother," Merlin told him. Gother rubbed the mark. "Perhaps it is a function with my body?" he asked. "Possibly, perhaps your creator left some hidden secrets within you. For a long time you assumed that your emotions were only functional due to an accessory made of glass," Merlin stated. "Or perhaps it's the tasting seal that was placed on my tongue," Gother suggested. For a moment Merlin frowned, and Gother believed it was because it was just bringing back more memories of the dead. However, the real reason due to the logic behind why Gother was given a tasting seal. Sure, he was able to enjoy food, but since he's not a sentient with all the required functioning body parts. "Gother, how exactly do you remove the food that you put inside of your body?" Merlin asked. Flashback. Naruto sighed. "Why do I do this? Because I'm weak-hearted, charitable, humble," he asked himself as he tried digging out all the chewed-up pancakes inside of Gother's torso. "Because you are prideful and wish to be appreciated, little brother. Therefore you gave me a seal to enjoy your cooking," Gother answered as he ignored the fact that Naruto had to cut him open with tools he borrowed from Merlin. Things quickly got weird as Ban came in and witnessed the situation. "Why?" is all he asked. Gother decided to answer. "There is a lot of butter and syrup clogging up several gears and pieces. I need them removed in order to properly function," He answered as he knew this would become a routine. Dan sighed. Why did you choose to feed him? He asked. Why do anything, Dad? Naruto asked as he started scraping off the syrup. Why did I think this was a good idea? He asked as the syrup was hard to remove. End of flashback. Merlin gave an emotionless stare after Gother told that story. The greatest mage in all of Britannia had yearned to learn everything she could in her lifetime. Yet there are just some questions that aren't meant to be answered. Then again, there are just some things in life that are not meant to be discovered or studied. At least now we know Ban won't feed you. Merlin said as Gother nodded. It was rather tiresome to have my abdomen removed just to scrape away the syrup and butter. Though I should have the seal removed. Gother said, seeing as there was no need to taste anymore. Merlin gestured for Gother to open his mouth and took a look at the seal on his tongue. It looked simple. Not that I mind a challenge, but I doubt Naruto would use something stronger. She said as she used magic cancel to break the seal. Though she was surprised by the sight of a signature slowly fading away, it looks like my little dragon was prideful enough to leave his hand signature on his seals. She said with a light giggle. Are signatures required for sealing? Gother asked. I believe not. I did have to borrow some knowledge from the village library. Fuinjutsu as they call it is sensitive, so a wrong brush stroke can cause trouble. Though goddess clan Fuinjutsu is more powerful, it's more complicated but able to ignore minor details like a signature with the proper handling. Merlin explained. Gother nodded. For a moment there I assumed we could have found a signature on my symbol. He suggested. Merlin tilted her head as she placed her hand over his symbol, magic cancel. As the spell took effect, a small glow appeared over the symbol, but it still stood there. Well, I guess it's not a seal or magic of any kind. She said. I see, well anything is worth trying. Gother said before putting a shirt on and preparing to leave. Anything interesting is worth investigating, Gother. Merlin said as she opened a journal. Whether it's you finding a piece of art created by ink to be filled with magic or Vivian rambling on about Avalon. She said. Gother stared blankly at Merlin. Avalon. Is that a plot of land or the name of a plant? He asked curiously. Maybe there's a garden there. I haven't been there in a while, but all lands have something unique about them. Maybe there is a garden on Avalon. Merlin said, causing Gother's pupils to dilate and disappear completely. Garden of Avalon. Gother muttered as he started to lose his balance. I'm sorry, Merlin was stopped as Gother's magic managed to affect her mind. What she didn't already know was the fact that the doll wasn't even in control or aware of his actions. After a few seconds had passed, Merlin collapsed onto the floor and lost consciousness along with Gother. Is everything alright in here? Asked a voice belonging to Eskener as heard the noise only to be shocked by the sight of his teammates. Ms. Merlin. Gother. He exclaimed as he tried shaking them awake. What's going on? Ban asked as he along with Meliodas heard all the commotion. I don't know, something happened and now these two are unconscious. Eskener answered. I'll get Elizabeth. Meliodas said as he ran off while Ban tried taking a look at the situation with Eskener. Meanwhile, in the remnants of Lions. In one of the old bedrooms of the castle. A young girl with pink hair and blue eyes awakened. She sat up and stretched out her arms before giving out a loud yawn. Oh my, that a long rest wasn't it? How long was I out, Gother? She asked as she looked around before realizing the state of her bedroom. What happened? She asked as she got up only to stumble. Taking a deep breath, the girl felt as if her body had just come to life for the first time. As she shook her head and regained her bearings, she walked out of her room. Only to be further disturbed by the sight of the castle's interior decay. How long was I asleep? The girl asked as she started to look around for others in the castle. Father. Mother. Bartra. Denzel. Anyone? She asked as she started to get worried. There were no guards. Where are the guards? There are no servants. Where are the servants? There was no sign of her family. Where is her family? Gother wasn't here either. Where is Gother? All these questions, but no answers. Only more questions and a mystery that terrified her as she made it past the gates to witness that the entire kingdom was deserted and had fallen apart. The buildings were hollow and ready to fall apart. This really terrified the girl as she could only find herself wiping away her own tears at the thought of something bad happening to her citizens, as well as being isolated. It's just me. Someone. Anyone. Please answer me. The girl pleaded before falling onto her hands and knees. Where there was nothing but a seemingly endless dark void of despair. Only hope could reveal a path of light for the girl to follow. What is this? She asked as she noticed a light coming from within her home. As the girl made her way deeper into the castle. She immediately noticed some strange portraits that were never there before. One of them was of an older Bartra being crowned. Then one of Denzel standing in front of the holy knights. After that, there were a few of various girls she had never seen before with dates that would state that they were from a future period of time. Margaret Lyons, first princess. Veronica Lyons, second princess. Elizabeth Lyons, 3rd Princess. Bartra had daughters. This is unsettling. She said to herself as she noticed an older painting of herself with a more current date. Nadja Lyons, 1st Princess. Calm down Nadja, I'm sure there's a reasonable explanation for this. Nadja said to herself as she finally found the room where the light was coming from. Nadja realized that she was in the old library and that the light died down to one spot. A single book was sticking from upon a high shelf. Letting her curiosity take over, Nadja looked for a stable ladder and climbed to grab the glowing book. It was large and very heavy, but it appeared brand new as if it had just been published. No sign of preservation or decay of any kind. How strange. Wait. That means someone is likely here earlier. Nadja said as hope had returned to her heart. Even when everything she knew was gone. Nadja Lyons knew that there was a reason for her to live. It was odd and it may sound ridiculous, but she believed it was all because of the miracle that she had found this book. A book she would consider to be a sacred tomb. Book of Avalon. But 012607. Hey, are you still sleeping in there? Asked a male voice. The person they spoke to was a black-haired little girl who's sleeping in a handmade backpack. Luckily, with the combination of her height and the size of the backpack, she was able to be carried around easily. I just woke up, but I feel drowsy. The girl said as she rubbed her eyes and peeked out of the bag. Okay, just checking, let me know when you get hungry. I'll make a quick stop since there's still a lot of daylight out here, said her companion. The girl's companion was a young blonde man in his mid-teens. His clothes were a bit worn and torn, but he was able to keep them put well together. Where are we? The girl asked. I don't know, but we're really close to the ocean. Maybe I can make something to start fishing, the boy said with a light chuckle. The girl smiled. Hey, look over there. I think I see a mountain, she said as she pointed to the ocean. The boy looked on with interest. What do you think that place is? He asked. I heard there's an island outside of the continent where elves live. They have beautiful gardens and create lots of nice things, the girl said. I'm guessing there's a lot of fancy magic there, he said with a chuckle as the girl gave a light blush. Don't worry if you want. Maybe I can give it a try and walk on the water like I showed you, he said. But it has to be a few kilometers away if you walk it somehow, the girl said. The boy scoffed. I can do a lot of things. Walking isn't too hard, he said defiantly. The girl looked a bit disbelieving but decided to trust him. Okay, but I guess I owe you a debt if you can get us there, she said. I'll call you on it in the future. For now, we should stop and eat first, the boy said as he carefully put her down. Flashback, 2 weeks into construction, Boar Hat. Once again, it was another small party at the Boar Hat. The place has a lot memories and history, and now Naruto wanted to make more. This place was his inheritance after all, and he had lots of big shoes to fill. Especially considering that the tavern mostly relied on alcohol and bad food, with Meliodas attempting to get the girls to wear cute dresses. He even heard a rumor from Ban that Meliodas coaxed Merlin into wearing one, but failed to convince her to be a singer with Elizabeth and Diane. At least Gother looked ready to perform as he found the old costumes and had them washed and ready. However, his gaze turned to Merlin, who was sitting next to him. Naruto, you better not be picturing me in that dress, Merlin said with a sickly sweet smile. Naruto got nervous and started to sweat. Only to remember some advice Diane and Elaine gave him. Good thing their maternal instincts kicked, knowing Naruto was still a child, even when being raised by Ban, who they still saw as brutish. Rule number: never tell a girl she should try new outfits or change her style. Unless she's completely naked or close to it, or maybe wears damaged clothing all the time. Though to be fair, Merlin doesn't care for how much of her body she shows off. That rule was extended due to Diane's experience. It's a good thing too, since this was a perfect moment for the new dragon Sin to save himself. No, you look fine as you are, Haim, Naruto said as Merlin smiled. Remember, my eyes are up here, mister, Merlin said as she gestured to her golden orbs to test Naruto. I know, it's the most interesting aspect after all, Naruto said as Merlin sighed. Was that bad? He asked. You still lack tact, Merlin answered as Naruto groaned. More time passed, and from there, Ban presented his own alcoholic experiment. He called it the Duerger's Grundle, based on a time he met at war for something. To which he suggested the men drink competitively. Mostly to entice Naruto's pride as to taking a step forward and being the new leader. Mostly because he didn't want Merlin to take over due to her bossy nature, in his opinion, and everyone else didn't have faith in Ban. Leaving Eskener's prideful side as the only one volunteering if Merlin didn't take responsibility. Step right up, boys, you aren't men unless you take a swig, Ban said, pulling out the mugs. Naruto chuckled. My bet is Pinky passes out first, he said, referring to Gilthander. Margaret gave Gilthander a pleading look. I won't drink, he said. Of course he won't. If he's like his father, just staring at a drink will give him a hangover. Dreyfus spoke up mentioning Zaratra's having a poor alcohol tolerance. But I will. Hoser said sitting on one of the stools. Okay, chopped liver is up, what about you kid? Ban asked his adoptive son with a smirk on his face. Suddenly Naruto looked fearful as more rules came into his mind. Rule: don't drink alcoholic beverages until you are of age, young man. Especially on dates, and don't be peer pressured into doing it. Rule: don't let your date coax you into things you do not like or should not partake in. No. Naruto answered quickly. Ban snorted, weak, I thought I raised you better. He said. Naruto shot him a glare, hey, you wouldn't let me call you dad until I passed out from saving mom. He said. Ban sighed, hey, that was a life or death thing. I'm just ashamed that as a man, I can't sit down and enjoy my brew with my son. He said, feigning sadness. Merlin smiled, I never thought I would see you as the fatherly type, Ban. She said, knowing Ban used to only care for himself and his own ambitions. Greed doesn't necessarily mean wanting money. It means wanting more of everything they desire. Whether it's physical objects or titles, monetary or emotional value, anything someone covets will lead to greed. Obtaining such things would often mean shutting others out to achieve one's ambitions. Yet here's this grown man adopting a boy that isn't his and raising him to be a man. Whatever, I never thought I'd see you even try to settle down with anyone. Ban said before looking at Naruto. Especially my idiot son, who do I need to remind you, is actually the captain's descendant? He asked. Merlin's smile never left her face. I admit he seems immature and tactless, but then again. We all make strange gestures in attempt to find love. She said as Naruto tried to hide his blush. That's when Diane poked her head in, is this a confession, Merlin? She asked excitedly. The concept of Merlin doing something stupid and wild was something Diane really wanted to hear. Along with Eskener, who suddenly shuffled a couple steps closer to listen in. Though both are unaware that Merlin used to have romantic feelings for Meliodas. Along with both being founders of the 7 deadly sins and being friends many years before. However, the greatest mage in all of Britannia was not going to expose her embarrassing secret as to how she confessed her attraction to Meliodas. The upside is that Naruto looked closer to his late teens and could age properly. Even if being a mix of both of his clans gave him an extended lifespan. Which Naruto is likely unaware of. Yes, it is Diane. Merlin said, confirming Diane's suspicion. Only for Merlin to take a sip of alcohol from fine glass, but I will never tell you. She said, shooting down the giant girl's question. Moo, so mean. I thought we were friends. Diane pouted while tugging on her pigtails. We are friends, Diane, just not close enough for me to expose my secrets to you. Merlin said as Diane continued frowning before going back to her seat. Wow, girl talk is so boring. I guess I'll take a swig of my own brew. Ban said as he poured some alcohol into his own glass and chugged it down. Only to turn red already, not drunk, but that thing kicks harder than a wild horse. He said while looking at the bottom of the glass. My turn. Hoser said as he took a swig only to cough. Top liver can't handle a glass. Ban said with a smirk as Gilthander had to catch him. Hey Gil, smell this. Hoser said, putting the glass near his best friend's face. Hoser, don't put that. Gilthander immediately passed out before saying his objections. A few people laughed as Gil's eyes suddenly turned into swirls. It was clear that like Zaratra's, he was very weak around alcohol. Only this time he couldn't handle smelling it. Though Naruto had other ideas. Dad, what did you put in that stuff? He asked. Ban grinned, take a swig and find out. He said, giving him a ladle rather than a glass. Okay. Naruto said as he quickly took the ladle and subtly threw the alcohol away. Thereby pretending he was drinking by making slurping sounds. Not bad. He said. Before Elaine could berate him, she saw Ban frown. You used one of my tricks. He said. He did not accuse Naruto. Because he knew Naruto did it. Naruto refused to steal from others because of his weird morality. That didn't stop Ban from teaching him or taking from others. Since habits tend to die hard. And I could hear the drink splatter. Merlin added as Naruto frowned. I'm the opposite of proud. Ban said before Slater came in. Hey Slater, why does it feel like we haven't seen you in like a really long time? He asked. I've been feeling ill lately. Slater answered. I could fix that. Merlin said as Slater raised his hands up. No thank you, big sister. Also I wish to partake in the grundle. Slater said as he removed his mask and took a sip. Then falling down on the floor, and the grundle takes another victim. Ban said as Slater was dragged away. Then Dreyfus took a seat. I accept the challenge. He said as Ban shrugged and gave him a glass. Dreyfus immediately started gripping the counter. You ready to give up? Ban asked. Never, holy knights never surrender. Dreyfus said as he took another sip and let out a loud groan. Hendrickson shook his head at his friend's antics. I suppose even being related to Zaratra's makes you weak to alcohol. He thought. A few minutes later. Seeing that the Duergar's grundle has yet to be defeated. Ban thought it was time to retire his seemingly powerful brew. Yet he was stopped by Merlin of all people. The same sorcerer who was usually serious despite having that same smile on her face. What a lot of people didn't know is Merlin has a very strong alcohol tolerance and would hardly show it if she suddenly got drunk. Godspeed her whoever is in charge of the afterlife. Ban said as he was grabbing a glass only for Merlin to grab the ladle. Are you sure? I mean Dad probably set the alcohol level to Naruto couldn't finish his doubts as Merlin finished her drink. You were right Naruto, it's fine. Merlin said not looking affected whatsoever. Then again, you were never drinking to begin with. She said before taking another sip. Naruto immediately realized another problem he created. He broke one of the rules implanted into his head. Rule never doubt a woman's capabilities. Especially when they take on a new challenge. Unless that challenge can greatly damage their health. What the hell are you made of? Ban asked as he could hardly handle the alcohol. Despite being an immortal and regardless of taking the QB's power after the semi-successful invasion of his body. Ban didn't get an improved alcohol tolerance. His regeneration relied greatly on the body and keeping him alive. It couldn't care less if he was poisoned. Yet Merlin is just downing each drink like they're glasses of water. Naruto was wide-eyed at the decent amount she finished. That was enough to put down an army of rhinos. He said knowing no mortal man could survive a full glass of Ban's experimental alcohol. Merlin just closed her eyes and smiled. I'm no ordinary woman my little dragon. She said putting aside his concern. Naruto continued to stare at the grundle. So are you still fine? He asked. Merlin's answer was taking one last sip from the grundle. Instead of giving the impression that she loves alcohol apparently. Merlin didn't swallow her drink but instead pulled her lover's face against her before pulling him into a deep kiss. To be fair it was gross and unsanitary with people suddenly feeling concerned about germs. As the alcohol moved between their mouths. Slowly getting Naruto drunk. On the bright side, there is no pandemic. Woo. 2019 is a great year. No matter what they say. Said a disembodied voice. Ironically, it looked like the bar was gaining some business. As the door opened revealing a couple of off-duty shinobi coming in. Lighten up Iruka, I heard this place was new. Said a random jounin. I don't know, I got tests to grade and everything. What would my students say if they saw me? Iruka stopped as he noticed Naruto kissing Merlin. He immediately turned around and walked away. Nope. He said pretending he didn't see anything. Luckily Naruto didn't notice him as he pulled away. I don't like the hiccup taste of alcohol. He said. Merlin laughed, but I'm assuming you like the taste of something else. He said as Naruto turned bright red. Later. Luckily none of the shinobi recognized Naruto, except for Iruka who ran away, despite all the fame he had started gathering. Well it wasn't fame, it was just more positive reviews and a few less glares. Regardless, the night was nice, and Merlin soon found herself having quite a bit of fun outside of the lab for once in a long time. It's 1:15 midnight. Merlin said with a yawn. Naruto stood up, come on Merlin, I can walk you home. He said. Merlin nodded as she slowly stood up and tried to walk. Only to fall into Naruto's arms and hanging on to him for dear life. Merlin giggled as she put her head on his shoulder and whispered into his ear. I can't walk. Take me to your room. Merlin said as she moved her arms around his neck. Suddenly Slater stood up, Naruto Lions, you best not be having dirty thoughts about my big sister. He exclaimed. Shut up Slater. Big sister can take care of herself. Merlin said shooting a glare at Slater who was silenced. Up, wanna go up? Carry me. She said in a childish voice. Naruto now found himself blushing, sure Haim. He said as he carried her up like a bride. Unfortunately most of the bar was already filled with drunks. So as Naruto ascended up the stairs. He heard a lot of catcalls and smart remarks making him groan. Why did Merlin decide to get drunk? Naruto's room. Naruto sighed as he came in. The new dragon Sin of Wrath gently laid Merlin down despite having trouble removing her arms. Though Merlin started to yawn as her eyes started to close. Realizing that his room was taken by the most stoic yet mysterious member of his grandfather's team. Naruto turned around and attempted to walk back out. Wondering if there's an old couch he can pull out or bunk with Gother. Scratch that, Gother lives in the storage room, but Naruto is too kind-hearted yet blunt and decided to call it a room. I wonder if mom and dad will let me sleep on their floor. Naruto thought while feeling embarrassed. Please don't. Naruto stopped as he reached for the door. He watched Merlin trying to lift up her arm, not again, please. Please don't leave. Merlin muttered. Naruto suddenly felt concerned as he approached Merlin. He got on his knees and put his elbows on the bedside. He gently reached for Merlin's arm and pondered between waking her up or trying to comfort her as she slept. No, don't leave me. Don't leave me. Come back. Merlin began to whimper as she raised her voice. Naruto quickly raised an arm and activated a silencing seal. However, he blushed and mentally face-palmed as to why he had a seal there. Why did he have a silencing seal? Everyone is going to be suspicious of him. Putting aside his panic, he looked back at Merlin, who was crying. "Time?" Naruto whispered. "Please, please stay, I don't want to be alone anymore," Merlin whispered as tears fell down her eyes. Naruto held her hand with both of his, giving it a little comforting squeeze. "I'm not leaving, Merlin. I'll always be here," Naruto whispered into her ear. "Don't lie." "I'm not." "Stay." "I will." "Promise." "I promise." Suddenly, Merlin's eyes slowly opened and she turned her head. Naruto blinked in surprise before blushing lightly at how close he was. When he considered letting go and explaining himself, he froze. Naruto froze upon seeing Merlin smile. It was a different smile. It wasn't her usual smile that she gave everyone, it wasn't one of pleasure or one that said she would enjoy putting Naruto in a vast amount of pain. It was one of pure joy, as if she had witnessed a miracle. "Time?" Naruto asked. "You did come back. You've always been back," Merlin said as the tears didn't stop. "Merlin, I think you might a bit drunk. You should go back to sleep and whoa." Naruto stopped as Merlin lifted him into the bed. "Seven deadly sins asked 1,000 love." Surprised by the sudden strength, Naruto didn't have time to react as he felt Merlin press his face against her chest. Now he felt the bitter irony of him making her blush all the time, now she was doing the same to him. It didn't make him feel better that she was stroking the back of his head. "Merlin Heim, I think we should stop. I think Dad's grundle had 1000% alcohol, so it might not be. Please be quiet." Naruto was silenced upon hearing that. He slowly nudged his head despite Merlin's grip keeping him down. Only to glimpse as Merlin had a teary-eyed smile on her face. "I missed you. I thought I lost you forever," Merlin continued to mutter. "Heim? Is something wrong?" Naruto asked, feeling as if it's more than alcohol behind this. "No, you're here with me," Merlin said as she slowly let go of him. As Naruto slithered away and onto the other side of the bed, Merlin slowly moved closer to him, cupping his cheek and moving her pink lips closer to his own. Naruto gently pushed her away. Merlin looked disheartened to the point tears formed in her eyes. "Naruto," Merlin said. "Merlin, I don't want to take advantage of you. You're not in the right state of mind," Naruto told her as he gently held her arms. However, Merlin wouldn't have any of that. "Naruto, I am in the right mind. I am. Don't you remember?" she asked frantically. As her rant was about to continue, Merlin stopped and just started to sob. The greatest mage in all of Britannia was brought to tears yet again. Merlin let go of Naruto and turned away as she let the tears fall down her eyes. Naruto gently tapped on Merlin's shoulder, fearing that he did something to offend her in some way. Which really meant something, as Merlin rarely showed many emotions. "Merlin, what's wrong?" Naruto asked. Merlin held the side of her head and winced. "Naruto, you aren't the same one. No, you've changed even after everything, why wouldn't you let me?" she said when she abruptly stopped mid-sentence. Naruto gently held Merlin, whose pupils dilated, as if she had lost consciousness but kept her eyes open. The phenomenon was frightening to understand, and yet, she just fell on his chest. Naruto gently rubbed her back in an attempt to wake her up, but to no avail. "Merlin. Merlin. Please wake up," Naruto pleaded as he moved on to gently tapping her soft cheek. Naruto slowly sat up and attempted to lift the sin of gluttony. "I gotta tell everyone. Something is wrong," and he stopped abruptly as well. Naruto's eye dilated as he felt a surge of energy hit him as well. Naruto fell back onto the bed with Merlin on his chest. Naruto struggled to break free of whatever was affecting him, only to see a strange mark release energy from Merlin's back. The last thing he witnessed was Merlin's eyes closing as a single teardrop fell down her cheek. The next morning, Naruto opened his eyes and yawned. Despite feeling groggily and exhausted both physically and mentally for some reason, he attempted to get out of bed, only to find himself sharing it with his new girlfriend yet again. "I'm in trouble," Naruto muttered fearfully. Although completely unaware of last night's actions. "You would be if I felt anything. I am not the type of woman that leaves herself vulnerable," Merlin said as she opened her eyes, terrifying Naruto in the process. "However, I suppose Ban is to blame for this. With your poor, rather non-existent tolerance to alcohol. I would say Ban lifted up whatever resistance you had and expected something to happen," Merlin explained. "It's a good thing I'm not like my dad," Naruto said. Merlin smiled. "Yes, quite good," she said as she stood up. "Though I suppose today should be a day full of productivity," she said as Naruto nodded. "Yeah, thank Kami for another day," Naruto said. While Merlin was somehow unaware of last night's events as well. The remnants of Lions, Modern Era. Naja sat on a chair as she looked over the book that filled her with much hope. The Book of Avalon, as it was called, was strange and a bit confusing to her. Nadja could be described as a stereotypical princess, one that is young and naive with a sense of adventure, rather than being cooped up in a castle. Back when she had met Gother, she was more than ecstatic to have someone who can relate to her love of fantasy and romanticism. However, while a temporary source of hope and morale, there was still the concern for survival. The fact that Nadja has no experience traveling or scrounging for food. Especially considering the fact that due to her sickly status in her era, she wasn't allowed to leave home outside of riding on a horse with Gother. And no one knew about her exploring the underground where she found Gother and what was left of his creator. An interesting book, calligraphy is different compared to normal works, and the illustrations are unique to some extent. Nadja said to herself before finding a seemingly useful page. The history of the modern world. What's this? Nadja asked as it wasn't at all mentioning the new era. Or at least the one she had in mind. Nadja believed she had awakened only a few decades into the future. Maybe a bit over a century or so if the kingdom is in ruins. Yet, to find herself in an abandoned world where the culture has gone through significant change. It was terrifying to consider. The world is still filled with violence. A world mostly dominated by humans succeeding an era of the battle between clans. Clans being a replacement for royal families. For while the magic is gone and having been replaced by chakra. Clans are often noted by families coming together and working under clients. Those clients in turn would pay them a sum of money for tasks that would be deemed dishonorable and even illegal in most instances in the old era. From bodyguard duty to bandit extermination to even assassination and robbery of high-ranking authoritative figures in government. Such is the world, a scary place. One where thugs would claim righteousness through combat. It was years later that the hidden village were made and several of these thugs would work together and create villages. Many being given special treatment for obtaining a special ability unique to the family, known as Kekai Genkai or bloodlines. In the end, the world is no different as it just gives thugs a banner to unite under to combat other banners. A pointless era with no peace. For while many speak of peace, they contradict themselves by explaining how pointless it is to change the system. For the system is keeping them alive rather wealthy and happy. Never speak of change if you refuse to contribute to it somehow. Nadja gasped as she covered her mouth. This was all the abridged summary of the world. With the author having disdain and strong opinions of the system. The only difference in her era is that there was usually more laws and more active people working to prevent such things happening, as wars were less common. Of course for Nadja, there had only been one holy war and it has been just under 3 millennia since then. While the world is terrifying and foreign, I must leave my home. Nadja said to herself, though distraught at the idea of leaving her home. I have so many memories and it's painful, yet there's nothing left for me here. She said sadly as she continued looking over the pages. Once again finding another page that could help. It was risky, but it was a plan worthy risking. Flare, a technique used to blind threats as well as used as a communication signal often used for distress. May God have mercy on my soul. Nadja said as she worried about whose attention she would gather. Back at the mansion. Merlin woke up on her bed from the shock Gother gave her. Even with all these questions and concerns revolving around within her head. Her first course of action was to reach out to the side of the bed. No, that shouldn't matter anymore. Merlin said to herself. When she tried to sit up, Merlin held her head in pain before realizing there were bandages around her head. I swear, maybe my curiosity will kill me one of these days. She said to herself as she attempted to sit up. Though she couldn't help but wonder what had happened, I was talking to Gother about his mark. Then what happened? She asked herself. Despite the headaches, Merlin just remembered having an ordinary conversation with Gother. Something about his mark of the ram possibly being tampered with. Along with some talks about Fuinjutsu and the nature of the art. Then the conversation ended with Merlin saying that anything is interesting whether it's Gother's endless curiosity or Avalon. Merlin asked herself. A minute later, Elizabeth came in with a tray of medicine. Merlin, how are you feeling? She asked. Merlin groaned, like a bookshelf fell on top of me, big sis. She said calling Elizabeth by her nickname. Elizabeth smiled as she put the tray down and sat by her side, knowing your endless curiosity. You would give yourself a headache. She said with a bright smile. Merlin shook her head, I suppose it's my sin. She said. Though, what happened after I lost consciousness? She asked. Elizabeth put a finger on her chin and thought it over. Sir Eskener called for us, and that's where we found you and Gother unconscious and on the floor. So I went to check on your condition. Only I found nothing wrong with you except for sudden exhaustion. She explained. Merlin frowned at this, how strange. She said unsure of what to make of this answer. You should rest Merlin. Elizabeth suggested. I think I should. Merlin was about to retort when she felt her head starting to throb. No arguing little sister. Elizabeth said as she gently laid Merlin back down onto the bed. Surprisingly, Merlin argued with Elizabeth by groaning very loudly, even in the form of a woman. "You are still a child, Merlin," Elizabeth said with a giggle. "You're mean," Merlin told her. "If taking care of someone who I see as my family makes me a bad person, then consider me horrible," Elizabeth said while giving her a kiss on the forehead. A couple of days later. The office of the Hokage, as Herodias had taken charge. She had planned to keep the home of her teacher's descendant alive. Even if the boy died for a village that didn't deserve him. Herodias knew that Naruto sacrificed himself because he was above the bloodthirsty monsters that the Demon King wanted to mold his sons into becoming. She supposed it was a matter of principle or something. Regardless, aside from the continued investigation of the women claiming to be the two deceased Uchiha clan members. A strange news had reached her ears. From the new spy network handled by a more competent and younger shinobi in her ranks. Herodias had discovered a strange light emitting a powerful source of energy from the ruins of Uzushio. The goddess had a very good idea as to what was actually causing the light happening. That only meant that the village needed to react more quickly before Kumo, or anyone else could attempt to reach it. But that, she had summoned a few members of the 7 deadly sins. "As expected, you are all wondering why I am requesting you here," Herodias said as she looked at King, Diane, Gother and Ban. "It has to be big if you need this much of us," King said as he knew Jounin were strong and had more capabilities compared to most knights. "You are possibly the most beings in this village. Especially with all 7. I'm sorry I meant. It's fine. Just get to the point," Ban said as he didn't want to think about his adoptive son. Herodias nodded. "Well, it was good to have Meliodas back. Especially as he's more experienced and stronger than his grandson before death. It wasn't fair to decide who was replacing who and who is the real 7th sin. So it was best to leave that out, even if the 7 deadly sins put together are stronger than the Sannin in their prime and could possibly give a Hokage or two some difficulty. Thus, the reason why this was an important mission." Herodias cleared her voice before speaking again. "As I learned, several months ago the search to restore the 7 deadly sins started in the remnants of lions. What most of you don't know is that the kingdom itself was hidden in a secret access point for many years in the village of Uzushiogakure no Sato," she explained. "So we're heading back to the home of Naruto's clansmen?" Gother asked. "Yes, the reason is that a large surge of energy including a bright light was seen there recently. I fear that the village could be pillaged or someone could attempt to find lions. Even if both lands are desolate and uninhabitable, I would rather not think about the potential of troubles of what could happen if other villages find the barrier regardless of the ceiling that protects lions," Herodias explained. "I get it, we'll see what's going on. Report back and hopefully make sure no one goes looting into a dead piece of land," Ban responded as he understood the basics. "Very well, you are free to request backup if you wish. I know there may be chance that one of the sisters would wish to see their home again," Herodias said as the group bid their leave. In the meanwhile, Herodias looked at the file of the Uchiha women again. Herodias refused to believe it and wanted to deny such things came true. Sure, Meliodas and Elizabeth was a giant shock, but their bodies were kept in perfect condition in their tomb of sorts. Yet, the women claiming to be Mikoto and Izumi were still the same as when they died. As if they were suddenly taken out of their coffins and rejuvenated. While Herodias could consider digging up their respective graves. She wanted to double-check everything and make sure they weren't just rogue Uchihas. A dark-haired Uchiha isn't something unique, but some going missing or hiding out for whatever reason is more plausible than resurrection. Or not even Tobirama Senju's Kenjutsu is capable of such a feat, and Elaine was only resurrected because of Naruto's studies of Elizabeth's healing magic among the various works and techniques within the goddess clan. Thinking about it, Herodias wanted to mention the idea of Elizabeth taking up her studies to resurrect Naruto that way. She wasn't sure if they had attempted to do so or if some moral action was stopping Ban from having it done. Perhaps the dead should stay where they are and that is in the afterlife. For even Meliodas and Elizabeth can't remember anything between life and death other than briefly using their soul fragments to visit their grandson during his childhood. Let's focus on the today and then the future, Herodias said with a sigh. A few hours later. Ban already stood right at the gate where the eternal Chunins were guarding the entryway. Both men holding their breaths along with the assigned guard dog in order to remain silent. It was due to the fact that they could sense the heavy amount of tension leaking off of him. After a few minutes of just watching him, Ban's team had arrived. The first two were King and Gother as they were suggested by Herodias. Yet the only other people coming with them were Veronica and Jericho. Not that I don't mind the backup, but what motivated you two? Ban asked. Veronica looked down, to be honest, with how short life is. Even with all these years passing by like seconds. I still want to see my home one last time and by chance, maybe there's some old belongings of mine and my sister's in the castle. She answered. I won't guarantee much for a scouting mission, but if we get the chance I'll let you look. Ban said before facing Jericho. The younger girl sighed, the same thoughts about home, and I've been thinking about my brother and visiting his grave if I have the chance. She said. It's fine, we'll just move quickly. Get the job done and see if there's time to look around. Ban said, making the girl smile. Did you two say your goodbyes? This mission is last minute after all. Gother asked. Elizabeth understands, and if anything, she made some of those seals. So she can visit lions if you guys let her. Veronica answered. Jericho gave a weak laugh. I'm sure Hoser won't die if I'm gone. She said, trying to sound positive. King smiled. I'm sure he and everyone else will be fine. It's not like we'll be gone for a millennium. He said before Gother hit him on the side of the head. King immediately nursed where he had been hit. What the heck, Gother? Why did you do that? He asked. I am assuming that was an inappropriate time for bad jokes, King. Gother said as King realized that maybe his joke was bad. Let's go before King says anything else offensive. Ban said, ignoring the glare from the sin of sloth. And with that, 3 of the 7 deadly sins, the former second princess of lions and a holy knight apprentice, left Konoha's gates. With a mission to return to their old home. Elsewhere, outside of Konoha. While the second invasion wasn't easy to overcome, they at least had reports from Naruto's scouts to better prepare for the war. Which was a good reason that casualties were reduced even without the help of the goddess clan. There was still the unseen attack by demon race, most of which were the ones who refused peace and coexist with the angelic goddess clan. Despite the massive healing spell that came out of nowhere, they are unaware it was caused by Naruto seconds before his death. Missions were being limited, but lower ranking and lower risk missions were being accepted. Mostly Genin and Chunins were taking on missions with very few Jounin that were available. As a sign that they were still strong, no doubt. Among them were members of Team Asuma and Team Guy. Another mission complete, Ten-chan. Although I expected a bit more. Lee said as Ten-ten sighed. Well, Lee, the village still needs the money and needs to prove its worth. Besides, I'm still shaking from the demon attack. Ten-ten said as she's been on a small medical prescription to handle the shaking and scary images. With many shinobi being killed and the goddess clan having to empower them and their weapons to better handle combating the demons. It was still a scary experience to handle creatures that were nothing like regular humans. Though the real good part was the fact that 2 commandments they ran into decided to leave once they considered Asuma and Guy a waste of their time. Though Guy was fairly close to unleashing his true power that none of them had seen before. Lee sighed knowing this. I know, Ten-chan, but well, impossible. Someone had to get the job done, and Guy-sensei went beyond limits to force the unyouthful demons to leave. Therefore I will grow strong again so no one, and I mean no one, will ever be harmed again. He said, knowing that wouldn't be the last time the paranormal would attack Konoha. Ten-ten wanted to have her doubts, but after Naruto left. Seeing her sensei getting serious was still fresh in her mind. That's when she realized that despite being a goofball, Guy was a Jounin for a reason, and his stupid challenges weren't just difficult, but actually helped him gain strength. I guess you're right, Lee. Though for now, these basic missions can help us keep some peace of mind. Ten-ten said despite how absurd the mission was. The mission was to help a princess named Fuku with her engagement to Chikara, the daimyo of the land of noodles. Originally she wanted to hire Ino Yamanaka, but due to her current suspension on the fact that she was being put into question as to whether or not she would be a capable kunoichi was on the line. They had to send a substitute. There was also the fact that the Henjure transformation was also a perfect tool. As while Ino did prove to look just like Princess Fuku, they had doubts with the fact she was barely turning 13. So in hindsight, it might be easy to point out a preteen pretending to be a woman in her 20s. Besides, a ninja disguising themselves would be more efficient as they could use every little detail they were given to perfect their disguise. Naturally, Ten-ten was an amazing and capable kunoichi and handled the mission well. Though she quickly learned that Chikara did like Fuku but also would have liked larger women. Apparently chunky women were all the craze for him. So with a little work with Lee, they forced Fuku to meet Chikara. Thinking about it, the princess was a hypocrite since Chikara was a large man and wasn't exactly the Adonis she described. So she assumed that Chikara loved skinny women. Regardless, Chikara fell in love with Fuku and declared her to be the perfect woman to be his bride. Mission successful, one would say. Ironically, some of the other genin not on probation were doing good as well. Ironically, as Lee and Ten-ten made their way home, they ran into a few familiar faces as well. Hey look, it is Shikamaru and Choji. Lee said as he saw the pair. Choji was the first to notice them. Hey Shika, look. He said. Troublesome, I'm guessing you guys got a boring mission too. Shikamaru asked. Shikamaru, your job was to sit there and not laugh. I saw you smirk, but you still got the job done right. Choji said, confusing Lee and Ten-ten. In a nutshell, the client's father passed away and left his property to the client, which contained a lot of ores and other valuables meant to be mined. The client would claim it after the funeral, so long as he didn't laugh during the funeral itself. Unfortunately, the client's sister married a rich man and became greedy and wanted the land so she can double her wealth. So the man feigned sickness and had Shikamaru take his place. However, before that, it turned out the food everyone was given had some sort of laxative that forced people to laugh instead of defecate. Luckily, Choji pointed it out due to his experience at his family restaurant over the years. Regardless, it turned out the father faked his death and had his other daughter put the laxatives in. Followed by bringing everyone to tears by laughter and getting a laugh from Choji and Shikamaru in the end. The reason was to bring his family together, as the old man used to make his family laugh as to keep them from depression as they used to be poor. Hence, the reason he set this up, and now, another mission success. And look. It's Guy-sensei and Niji. Lee pointed out. Only when those two arrived, they were escorting the Ichiraku father and daughter. Along with a bunch of prisoners from the looks of it. What the heck happened? Are these guys part of some kind of crime syndicate? Shikamaru asked. No, not remotely. Though despite the risk, Tucci-san here explained that his daughter was kidnapped by these ruffians because of a recipe for food. Niji explained. The scum recipe? I demanded. Hikaku, the kidnapper of AM, demanded. Then Tucci realized something. Oh. You meant the skim recipe. I must have called it scum when thinking about that layer on top when I worked on the skimming technique I used. My mistake. He said. A big mistake. Hikaku yelled incredulously. Listen here, buddy, I'm all for fine dining, but that doesn't excuse you from kidnapping people. That's a serious offense. Guy said with a look of dissatisfaction. Hikaku and the rest of his group hanged their heads in shame. While they were ninja chefs tasked with providing proper food for regular ninjas, they were still required to follow the law, and this was a bit too extreme. Luckily, Guy was stopping by for a veggie ramen and borrowed Niji to track them. Though ramen is okay, no offense Tucci-san. I'm more of a spicy curry type of man. Guy said as Tucci laughed. It's fine. Though I suggest turning Hikaku in so that the Land of Lightning's officials can pick him up. Tucci said before facing AM. Who was big enough to make Chikara fall in love again and maybe help AM so that she can fit through the door. He said. Toji on the other hand looked concerned. Tucci-san, is AM alright? She looks a bit thin, don't you think? He asked, making everyone sweat drop. Yeah, I feel like all that walking dropped a ton. AM said as the ninja chefs gave her too much cooking that kept her hungry. Later that night. Once the ninja chefs were turned into a local prison. The Konoha ninjas and the Ichirakus decided to stay at an inn. Seeing as they were at least one more night away from Konoha. Sure, Guy could force everyone into overdrive and make them arrive by tomorrow afternoon, but AM and Tucci were civilians. So their speed would be too much for the chefs to handle. At least the two were happy enough to feed the group. Despite Guy's earlier statement about curry, but wasn't one to deny food unless it actually harmed his health. So as the inn wasn't built for dining or provided food. The owner gave their blessing to Tucci to let him cook with the supplies he carried in case he still needed to go through with Hikaku's cooking challenge. How do you kids feel about this one? Consider it, Diet Ramen version 1.0. Tucci said as he was concerned by AM's health. He wasn't trying to be mean. Especially in front of an Akamichi, but he was concerned by AM taking in all that food so quickly. Putting aside the potential obesophobia. Everyone dug into their ramen and immediately found it amazing. Another job well done, Tucci-san. Lee said, giving the chef a thumbs up. I like it, but I feel like something is off. Choji said as he started bepizing the meal. Everyone continued to eat and give Tucci constructive criticism. All the while they were telling stories of their past missions. Deciding who had the most mundane task. Everyone was very sure that all these tasks were becoming rather hectic yet absurd. So it was kind of hard to understand what was going on outside of the village these days. The conversations took a pause once a man entered the room. It was a slightly tall man with dark hair, a white shirt with a blue coat hanging over his shoulders and red hakama pants. He looked around in confusion before noticing the group. Pardon me, I thought this was a kitchen. The man said. Nonsense, we're willing to share. Pull up a seat and maybe share some stories with everyone. Tucci said as he prepared another bowl. The man didn't mind a free bowl of food, thanks, I'm Nanashi by the way. He said as he took a seat next to Guy. Welcome, youthful stranger. I am Might Guy and these youthful children are some of my students and students of my closest friends. Guy said, already terrifying Nanashi with his attitude. Don't mind him, Nanashi-san, my sensei can be eccentric. Ten said. Do not sell our sensei short, Ten-chan. He is the most youthful sensei in all of Konoha. Lee exclaimed. Lee. Guy tried to say. So youthful that I wish to meet and even surpass him one day. Lee. I will climb every mountain using my thumbs and half a stick of gum. Lee. I will touch the sky in one jump. Lee. I will slice the clouds with a single chop. Lee. I will run so fast that the earth will rotate the opposite direction. Lee. Guy yelled as he hit his student hard enough to send him crashing into the ground. Lee, I admire the praise and the positive mental attitude, but your food will grow cold if you spend your time talking, rather than enjoying your meal. He said, somewhat angry. Lee quickly sat back up. How could I make a mistake like that? Thank you for the wisdom, Guy-sensei. He said before eating quickly. Lee, you fool, eating faster will not help. Niji said before Lee started choking. Nanashi sweat dropped at the strange behavior. These modern people are so much different than the apprentice knights from my era. He thought before eating. So Nanashi-san, if you don't mind asking. Where are you heading to? Choji asked as Shikamaru thought the question was troublesome. I'm actually heading to one of the hidden villages. To be honest, I have never been to one because I live on a different continent. Nanashi said vaguely. The genin nodded. They assumed he was likely from one of the larger islands or countries with no shinobi village. Unlike those of Spring Country that have Yukigakure or the Land of Bears that has Hoshigakure. Other places just have samurai battalions and more traditional ninjas that try to practice old-school fighting. From the looks of Nanashi, they assumed him to be a Ronin and likely never had a reason to visit Hidden Village. After all, whether or not he was famous or known well enough, Ronin are only less dangerous than missing ninja and most mercenaries. So they aren't always the people Hidden Villages wish to hire. Either as shinobi or mercenaries to fight in their conflicts. Which one? I can offer directions. Guy asked. This one, Kanehagakure, I believe. Nanashi answered as he tried to maintain caution. I gave him a brief stare before smiling again. That's great. We're from Konoha. I'm sure if you handle all the procedures, you can be let in just fine. He said despite also having his own suspicions. I appreciate that. Nanashi said as he was ready to leave or escape if necessary. Because in a new world that left his old one behind. One could never be too careful when they have slightly more cautious and barbaric mannerisms. Lion's Ruins, a few days later. A few days of traveling later and Ban's group finally arrived. Only to find that bright light flashing in the distance once the seal was broken by a goddess clan summon. Double time, people. The last thing I want is people snooping around. Ban said as the barrier closed behind them. As the group made their way deeper into Lions. King felt the most nervous as he and Diane were sealed away in the outskirts of Tokigakure. So he never saw what was left of Lions. Neither did Merlin and Escanor now that he thought about it, since Naruto said he found them in a cave in the desert. King started to think that if Merlin cared enough, she would have likely came as well or at least sent someone so they can retrieve whatever was left in her research hut. You know what's funny? King asked, hoping his next joke wouldn't offend anyone. What? Ban asked. Back when we found Elizabeth and Hendrickson was possessed and turned into a grey demon. He destroyed Merlin's research lab. King said. Ban gave a weak smile. Okay, I admit she doesn't show it, but Merlin does get mad. He replied. That's not the funny part. The funny part is with everything having happened. Her new lab is likely destroyed or it at least looks worse than the boar had. King explained. Gother tilted his head. I do not see the comedy, King. All I see is the irony that the universe refuses to let Merlin have nice things. He said. Jericho gave a weak laugh. Knowing you guys, I remember hearing about your last mission before you were all framed. What was it you destroyed? A church altar? She asked. Gother nodded. We did. It just proves that whether we are seen as heroes or villains. My team cannot guarantee the safety or protection of valuables. He said. Veronica sighed. You better not be referring to this fancy antique I just found that is probably priceless and the last thing left in my kingdom's history. She said, holding up a jeweled egg she just found. Ban scoffed. Of course not. It's a fancy egg, so it's not like I'll destroy it like I'm doing right now. He said as he took the egg and threw on the ground. Only it didn't crack, but just made the ground shake. Veronica gave Ban an annoyed stare, as did Jericho, while King groaned. Ban chuckled as he picked it up and gave it back to Veronica. See? We won't destroy anything that's still standing. Ban said as Veronica realized this was a bad idea. Meanwhile, another purple-haired princess was still patiently waiting in her castle. Still rummaging around and trying to find something edible to stay alive for another few days. Only to feel as if something was different in her atmosphere. Nadja immediately ran towards the wind and gasped in surprise as she saw the group approaching the castle. Without even thinking of caution. Nadja ran down to her castle entrance and lifted up her gate in an attempt to present herself. When she did, the group got into defensive stances only to see Nadja pulling on her dress skirt and curtsying. Welcome, travelers. I am Nadja Lyons. First Princess of Lions and daughter of King. Nadja stopped as she saw a familiar face. Prisoners of the sky, Ostalithabist. While Veronica was annoyed thinking Nadja was some crazy woman that somehow broke into her home, pretending to be her deceased aunt. Gother pushed everyone aside as he stepped forward. Naja, is it really you? Gother asked with a surprised face. Naja was taken aback by Gother's appearance. Gother she had no words to say. The princess ran up to Gother and tackled him down in a hug. Everyone was confused by the sudden action. Before they realized it, the princess and the sentient doll were kissing on the ground. Almost something out of a fairy tale. What the heck? Gother, what are you doing? King asked with a shocked face. He's being braver than you with Diane, obviously. Ban said as King grew a tick mark on his head. Well, it was fun and games now. The group were in for the shock of their lives. But 012607. The boy gasped for air as he finally made it to land. We did it. We finally made it to Avalon. The boy said. The little girl poked her head out of the bag. Wow, I should have had more faith in you. You really are the impossible man. She said. The boy grinned. Of course, I'll go anywhere for you. He said. The girl blushed. Don't make promises you can't keep. She said. The boy gave her a solemn look. I won't break them anymore. He whispered. So this part ends here. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, so quickly like this video for second part of this series. And comment down below your thoughts about this series. And now it's time for me to go, bye.